Those protests happening on the streets of Paris, France. The demonstrations continue to grow more dangerous as hundreds of thousands of protesters now are back on the streets, continuing to clash with riot police over President Emmanuel Macron's proposed rise in the national retirement age from 62 to 64, 2 years. Remarkable footage as we look at police here firing tear gas at the demonstrators, trying to disperse those large crowds in Paris, while the protesters are been hurling all kinds of objects at the police amid these standoffs. Even I've seen riot police get nailed with paint guns, and they've been moving back and forth. Right now, things seem to be a little more calm, but it has changed hour by hour. ABC News' Inez de la Cuetara actually is based there in Paris, France. I guess overall, Inez, as you've been watching all of this go down on the streets where you live, what is your reaction to what's happening?
Yeah, and it was just outside here today. So these protests have certainly been, something to see. The fact that it's over just 2 years of pension reform is certainly interesting. It's really sparked a nationwide movement. I will say we're seeing less of these protests. That's not to say they're not as strong as ever. In fact, they seem to be getting more violent, but we are seeing less. So it used to be that these big unions were organizing roughly 2 protests a week nationwide, and then we'd also be seeing kind of smaller, more sporadic, more spontaneous protests being held around France. So it felt like there was something happening every day. That was before the law passed. Now that the law has actually passed, there do seem to be less protests. The union's organizing about 1 protest a week. So it was last Thursday, this Thursday, next Thursday. We're also expecting another big nationwide protest. As far as the numbers go as well, we're starting to see less protesters turning out. So it was about a million people turning out in the early days of these protests. Last week, we were down to 400,000 protesters and or 450,000 protesters rather, and today we are down to 400,000. So the numbers do seem to be dwindling down. Some are saying that's evidence that the movement here is losing momentum. But what's interesting to note is that these protesters are, turning increasingly violent. So there may be less of them, but their frustration is coming through, and the protests do seem to be turning more and more violent.
So what are they telling you about this nationwide movement that we've now been covering for days? What are the protesters telling you? Kind of lay out the feelings and the concerns and why you think, even though there may be less protesters, it's getting more dangerous.
Yes, I mean, they're frustrated with the reform itself, of course. They say, that there are other ways to fund pensions. So Macron has been pointing to the numbers. He says the demographics are changing, that people are living longer, and that he doesn't have a choice, that the system needs to be reformed or the government will go in the red. These protesters say there are other ways to do that. They point to things like taxing the rich, for instance. So they're upset with the reform itself. They're also upset with the way Macron is going about it here. So Macron here using a procedure that's similar to executive action in the U.S., where he pushed this law through without a full vote from Parliament. And so many are saying that's anti-democratic. And so on the streets, when you talk to these protesters, there are those that are upset with the reform, but then there are also those who are just upset about the way he's gone about it. They say this is anti-democratic, and they say this is about the sake of democracy in France. And I remember speaking to a couple protesters a few weeks ago in the thick of it, who were part of these people that were lighting fires. And we should point out the majority of protesters are peaceful, but these 2 guys I was speaking with were saying, they feel that they haven't been heard, that they've tried to do things the right way, they've tried to protest peacefully, they're not being heard. And so they're saying if it takes, lighting fires right in the heart of Paris to get heard, then that's what they're prepared to do.
Well, we'll continue to follow it. Inez de la Cuetara there in Paris. Keep us posted. Thank you, Inez.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.